Hello, the Hayden Lake Watershed Association welcomes you to this recorded version of our 2020 Kootenai County Sheriff Candidates Forum. This video was recorded April 23rd, 2020, and will be posted on the Watershed Association website unedited on April 24th, 2020. My name is Will Neal. I am a Watershed Association board member and will be your host. Before I turn the forum over to our moderator, I will briefly describe the process and then introduce the participants. Our purpose is to give the candidates an opportunity to focus on lake and waterway issues in Kootenai County. We partnered with the Spokane River Property Owners Association and the organization called River Friends to identify a broader range of community concerns. Each candidate submitted answers to an 8-item questionnaire. They will respond to 5 of them during this video. The 8 unedited written responses will be posted on the Watershed Association website. The candidates here today are Mike Bauer, Kim Edmondson, John Grimm, Robert Norris, and Rick Whitehead. I have slips of paper here that have each of the candidates' name on them. And I'm going to go ahead and draw these randomly to establish the rotating order which they will use to respond to the questions. Candidate number 1 will be Rick Whitehead.
Hey.
Number 2, Robert Norris. Number 3, Kim Edmondson. Number 4, Mike Bauer. And number 5, John Grimm. Candidate number 1, Rick Whitehead, will be the first candidate to answer question 1. When we go to question number 2, we will begin with Robert Norris, and so forth through the list. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to answer question 1 and 2 minutes for the remaining questions. We are pleased to have Jim Stafford representing the Spokane River Property Owners Association with us, and representing the Hayden Lake Watershed Association are 5 of the 8 board members. Myself, Will Neal, I'm the DSO, Vice President Jan Wilkinson, Treasurer Barb Neal, and tonight's timekeeper, Gil Rossner. Our President, Jeff Harvey, will be the moderator. Are you ready, Mr. Moderator?
Yes, I am. I just want to very quickly say who we are. The Hayden Lake Watershed Association has been advocating for protection of Hayden Lake, its watershed, and the quality of the environment we live in our little place here in Idaho for about 18 years. And we follow in the footsteps of other entities like Save Hayden Lake and the Hayden Lake Protective Association that go back into the 1950s. So protection of Hayden Lake is not a new issue. All of these groups have sought to protect the lake. We deal with everything as broad as water quality of the lake, the management of the watershed, which creates that great water quality, the issues like debris, issues like invasive weeds, all those sorts of issues that the Watershed Association deals with. As you can imagine, boat wakes and boating issues are a big issue on Hayden Lake. That is the reason we have organized this Sheriff's Candidates Forum, to hear your views on primarily questions that have to do with those sorts of issues on Hayden Lake, or on all the lakes really. It's being recorded and will be put out on our website because we think this is going to be instructive to a lot of the people who own and live around our lakes and rivers. So with that, I'll go to the first question. And I'm going to have to put my glasses on for this. Excuse me. This is the background question. Can you please provide your background and qualifications, explain any experience you have had with enforcement on waterways, and describe your familiarity with the policing issues the Sheriff Department is facing in the lakes and rivers? I believe that is to Mr. Whitehead.
I was just waiting for a cue.
I'm sorry.
Make sure the timekeeper, whoever was ready. I'm ready if you're ready. I have just over 40 years in law enforcement experience, 33 of that in uniform. My last agency in uniform was the Travis County Sheriff's Office in Austin, Texas. I promoted up through the rank of captain there, led virtually all aspects of the agency. A couple of different times, I also led what was the Lake Travis Task Force. The west side of Travis County is divided by Lake Travis. It's a 68-mile lake, splits the county in half. We had a task force that was made up of all the agencies that had jurisdiction either on or adjacent to the lake. And during the summer months, we met monthly to coordinate law enforcement efforts on the lake. So I've got hands-on experience in marine enforcement, the resources that it takes to do that, and the task of covering that many bodies of water. In response to local issues with the Spokane River, I've been interactive with several of your groups, and I can't name them all by name, Friends of the Spokane River and others. I've been invited down to the docks. I've been in boats up and down the river and on the lakes, seeing firsthand the issues that we have locally in the boating traffic and enforcement issues. And I'm sure we'll get into more specifics later on the wake issues and how to handle those, but I've got extensive experience in handling the wake issues. One of the last events I handled on a lake was Aquapalooza 2010, which is tens of thousands of people coming onto your lake for a free concert. And I think I included a link to that in the questions I sent to you. Other than that, I've led hundreds of people, written $85 million budgets, implemented them. Like I said, I've led and worked all aspects of the Sheriff's Office, and I'm sure we'll get into the specifics of lake issues as we go. Thank you all for putting this together and inviting us tonight.
Okay, let's move to Mr. Norris, I believe. Go ahead and start.
It says I have to press, can you hear me? Because it says I have to press alternate A.
I can hear you, yes.
Oh, okay. All right. My name is Bob Norris, and I am a candidate to be your sheriff. I have 30-year law enforcement experience. I am currently a member of the Kootenai County Sheriff Search and Rescue Team. My law enforcement experience comes from the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Office, where I worked, supervised, and managed assets in both patrol and our jail division. Part of Los Angeles County, we do have quite a few waterways, and I am familiar and I have managed those types of issues within our waterways, such as the zebra mussel issues that we've had, very similar to the algae problem that you are experiencing. We've had to set policy within many of our waterways so we can make sure that people co-recreate together as far as the motorized population and the unmotorized population. We've had to put policy in place to safeguard safety and also shoreline damage and also property damage. And I'm very familiar with all of those types of issues. We've implemented policies for volunteer programs to educate the boaters when they come into the boating area on safety precautions that are necessary, and also on some of the areas of the lake that should be used a lot of caution with if there's hazards and what have you. And they gave away a pamphlet for that type of event. So that's pretty much my thumbnail experience in law enforcement and in those waterways here in my law enforcement experience.
Thank you. I believe next is Kim Edmondson.
Yes, thank you. Is my audio on?
Yes.
Very good. I'm Kim Edmondson. I'm a candidate for Kootenai County Sheriff. I've been a member of the Kootenai County Sheriff's Office since 1992, and I've been in the community for over 30 years. As a member of the Sheriff's Office, I don't have any experience with the Marine Division or patrol at all. And with that being said, the experience I have comes with the management experience that I have with the Sheriff's Office. Since 1990, I've worked throughout the organization. I'm currently a captain, and I lead the Investigations and Professional Standards Division. And the area that I've been placed throughout the organization, I have had no difficulty in managing any of those areas, developing the necessary skills that I need to be able to do so. So I have no doubt that going into a situation managing a unit such as the Marine Recreation Safety Division wouldn't be so much of an issue for me because of the good people that we have in place that actually do the day-to-day running of those operations. And so I would in no way want to take away from what they already know to do and the skills and experiences that they bring to the table. I do have a master's degree in organizational leadership from Gonzaga University. And so I plan to use that in my skills as well and in my management philosophy. And I'm an adjunct professor at North Idaho College teaching Intro to Criminal Justice as well. You know, as far as things that have hit home on the waterways and why water safety, boating safety in particular, would be very important to me is that my husband's brother-in-law was killed in a boating accident on Lake Coeur d'Alene several years ago, in 1991, I believe. And that really impacted us. And so boating safety is an important topic, certainly. It just isn't something that was in my path as far as my employment goes. And so with that being said, I think it's just important to note that this is something that I do take very seriously, I have put thought into, and I would look forward to having that organization or that unit be able to serve all of the people that enjoy our waterways in Kootenai County. And I thank you for the opportunity today.
Thank you. I've kind of lost track. Will, can you
Mr. Bauer?
Mr. Bauer.
Text.
Yeah, I'm unmuted. Is that correct?
That's correct.
My name is Mike Bauer. I'm speaking to you from above Carlin Bay, down in the south end of the lake. I'm on the east side. I've lived here for 8 years. Prior to that, I lived in Trout Creek, Montana, and that was near the Clark Fork drainage and that reservoir over there. I've spent a lot of time flying over the top of these lakes. I don't have a boat, so I haven't been on them, but I've watched over the last 8 years or so, watched the sheriff's enforcement teams and also the fire water vessels deploying out of this area over here. I came on the Sheriff's Department in Los Angeles County when I was 19, January 6, 1969. I was a detention officer. I became a deputy on my 21st birthday. I was sent to the press office after Lennox Station, and then I was promoted to sergeant. And I worked for 10 years in the Special Investigations or Intelligence Unit. And coincidentally, one of the some of the individuals that have been a problem up here were of interest to us down there. So I was familiar with that. From there, I promoted to lieutenant when was assigned to the women's jail. And then I was a inmate services lieutenant, and a county parole commissioner, granting parole to various individuals that had applied out of the county jail who did not have any other parole standards on them. From there, I worked the Risk Management Bureau, and then I worked the Inmate Reception Center, our big jail. And then I was promoted to captain and assigned to the Special Enforcement Bureau, which is more pertinent, I think, to what we're talking about here today. We ran, out of Special Enforcement Bureau, we ran the Emergency Services Detail, which is one of the few law enforcement paramedic units in the country. It's a very expensive and I'd say complicated management to run an operation like that. And we did dive teams, we did our swiftwater rescue with helicopters, we did mountain rescue, and we did the sort of recreational safety that Kootenai Sheriff's Department does here, but on a smaller scale. So that is my experience as it applies to the sheriff's job.
Mr. Harvey, your mic's off.
There we go.
As I muted it. Mr. Grimm, you're up next. I'm sorry.
All right, thank you. And thanks for putting this on. And my name is John Grimm. I've been a resident of Kootenai County for over 15 years, and I'm the only non-career law enforcement candidate in this race. My background is in manufacturing. I've owned a manufacturing company for 27 years. And prior to that, my brother and I built and sold an internet service provider company. Although as my time as a reserve deputy, I never worked the Marine detail, I do believe in Captain Edmondson's philosophy that you rely on good help and what they already know. But I do have very strong opinions, as I stated in my my answer, about safe boating. I've been a vessel owner or operator for about 34 years. I've owned my current boat for nearly 30 years. No, excuse me. Yeah, 30 years. And accident-free. But I have had the misfortune of watching the results of what happens when people fail to operate safely on the water. And they're often very tragic. In 1993, when my second daughter was newborn, we were down on Lake Havasu visiting some friends. And when we got T-boned by another boat, and I was ejected from the boat and nearly killed. So I do have strong opinions about enforcement, private property rights especially. And I think the issues that are facing the waterfront operators or the waterfront property owners are more easily solved than what we've been presented. So with that, thanks for putting this on tonight.
Okay, let's move on to the
Your mic's off again, Mr. Harvey.
It keeps going off on its own. Okay. This personnel question, the incumbent sheriff believes that the lack of qualified deputies, not budget, is the primary obstacle to adequately policing our lakes. Do you agree with his assessment? What is your plan to find and hire qualified candidates? What is your position on school resource officers and or training volunteers similar to the Citizens Marine Parole to supplement deputies' activities on our waterways?
Okay, Bob Norris, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I believe it's probably a combination of both. I believe that it's probably a combination of both of those factors. I would like an opportunity to evaluate this organization, see where I can find inefficiency and waste, and see if we can't put more resources towards our waterways right here in Kootenai County. So that's what I would like an opportunity to do at the beginning of my administration.
Any more? Is that okay?
Yeah, you know, I may not have heard the whole question. What? Because I didn't hear you.
Well, the other was what is your position on using school resource officers and training volunteers similar to the Citizens Marine Patrol?
Okay, yeah, I didn't hear that part. So yes, I believe that those are assets. I believe that we have a reserve program with our volunteer services that are underutilized that we could possibly look into using them more often. I believe that maybe even looking at the city of Hayden and see if they want to partner in providing any type of assets or an employee down there to help with that education of those boaters when they come into Honeysuckle. So I'd like to evaluate all of those potential options that we have for us.
Next, I believe would be Kim Edmondson.
Yes, thank you. In the past, a shortage of personnel has definitely been our obstacle. It's been really hard to recruit good candidates to the position, and usually through the background process, we start out with a number of applicants, and then it ends up with, I think last year we ended up with 3 people that were on, a 6th the year before, I believe. But this year we made some changes in our recruitment process that were really successful. We had a number of applicants, and through the recruitment and the background process, we ended up with 9 Marine deputy recruits that are going to be joining us, and that's pretty exciting. We were going for 10, but we didn't end up filling that last position. But I'm really excited about where we ended up for 2020's recruitments, for the season for 2020. So I don't think that that's going to be so much of an issue as far as the personnel. We're going to have a full staff pretty much. We do use our other staff members to supplement the Marine deputies. A lot of our people, the majority of them last year and the year before, were hired into our organization full-time, whether they went to detention or patrol. And so we can fall back on those who have served as Marine deputies in the past and supplement our crew on the water. So that's something that we do currently do. And I really like the idea of expanding that into a volunteer position and using like a citizen Marine patrol. I think that would be great. That's something that I'm really looking forward to being able to do when I'm sheriff, is to expand our volunteer program, something that I've been very active in for over the last several years, and it's really important to me. So that, is something that would be a real creative use for volunteers. But yeah, I think that the biggest issue for us is the shortage of people in the past, but this year, I just don't see that as a problem. We're also going to have some assistance, it sounds like, through Post Falls Police Department, or we're working towards the contract that would make some of that happen. So that's a creative thing for us to be able to do as well. And I look forward to seeing how that works for this season.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, I believe, is Mr. Bauer.
Thank you. I agree with Kim that volunteers would be a good supplement to what we have. I saw the bulletin for seasonal Marine deputies. I noticed that they're paid $17 an hour. That's about $5 more, $6 more than they pay at McDonald's right now. And that comment is for the BOCC's edification. If you're going to have active and efficient enforcement on the lakes and in our waterways, you're going to need to have some people. It's a very expensive proposition, and I think maybe that's has to be prioritized by the county, that they want to put some resources toward this. The sheriff is kind of limited in what he or she can do because the BOCC allocates that money. And I've made this point before, that BOCC is controlling the sheriff's destiny over there. And we need a really strong and good relationship with BOCC. That's something the sheriff has to do. And this is a safety issue on the water. It's environmental too, but it's a real safety issue. And I think that it needs the sort of attention that your organization is bringing to it with this forum.
Okay, Mr. Grimm, I believe.
Thank you. I disagree with Sheriff Wolfinger's assessment that it's just a personnel issue. As a manufacturer, we spend a lot of money on property taxes, as I'm sure the lakefront people do, and that's something that you're sensitive to. Last year, we passed the largest county budget ever at $105 million. And incidentally, there's another issue with a $5 million lawsuit that the sheriff's office is facing. So given the uncertainty we face economically, I think absolutely the budget is going to be a problem. And, you know, there's about 3,000 county sheriffs in the United States, and they all, to some degree, suffer from the same problems of understaffing and over budget. And I feel that's because we keep doing the same thing, and we elect the person that simply found their way to work long enough, or for the longest. My proposal, and I've already put it on my website from the very beginning, as a former reserve deputy, one of my goals is to rebuild the reserve deputy department back up, and my goal is to have 50 reserves. I see that. Thank you. Actively recruit among the community and bring back the Explorer program. As far as your specific question to SROs, you know, I spoke to an SRO the other night, and he said, yeah, that's kind of a coveted position, but I would want to be careful with that because they bid for those positions. So you'd have to manage it properly. But as far as staffing, I would start with running those boats with a full-time deputy and a reserve deputy.
Yeah.
And that just to safeguard the budget.
Mr. Whitehead.
Thank you. I've actually done Marine Patrol and led Marine Patrol, and I disagree with the sheriff's assessment on it's just being a personnel issue. I think Kootenai County has been recruiting for this position incorrectly in that they hire young college age people to come into the profession, start in the Marine unit, and then they recruit them from the Marine unit into the department, which puts the agency in a continual recruiting cycle for Marine Division year after year after year. Last year, they only fielded 3 of their 6 boats. And with the number of bodies of water in this county, that is woefully insufficient. Even manning all 6 is insufficient. Once you bring this person on board, then they have to learn the job, and more complicated, they have to learn to operate the vessel, whether it's a single engine vessel or a twin engine vessel. And that by itself, day to day, is risky. But then when you add enforcement to that and pulling up next to other boats and interacting with people is even more risky. One of the things I've already started discussions with is Kootenai County is loaded with retired law enforcement, and lots of those retired law enforcement would enjoy and like working the lake part-time. So I would hire a lot of those guys on a part-time basis, team them up with the young guys that we're still going to recruit, the young men and women that we're still going to recruit, and let them mentor them into the position. Because the lake patrol position, being in marine enforcement, is a huge public relations job. It's not all about enforcement. Enforcement's a last resort on the lake. It's about education and PR. And having that senior deputy with the law enforcement skills, the people skills, the de-escalation skills, mentoring those young people is a perfect team to man the lake patrol, and that's how I do it. SROs typically get all their training and take their vacation during the summer. So while it might seem they're easy,
We're going to have to move on here. The time has expended. If you'll keep a view of Gil over there, he's keeping the time. He's keeping the train on track here.
I was trying to squeeze that last bit in. I saw it.
Okay. Let's move on to the next question. And it deals with user conflicts. What is your plan? What do you see as the Sheriff's Department's role in managing the conflict between waterway users groups? Excessive boat wakes, reckless boaters can pose a danger to and prevent the enjoyable use of small boats, paddle boarders, kayakers, swimmers, and fishermen. How would you promote an understanding between these groups? And that's to Kim Edmondson initially.
Thank you. You know, that's a lot of groups with a lot of different interests, and everybody's got a particular, need and use of the water. So I think that a lot of it's just about education and really reaching out as best we can to provide, positive contacts in a lot of ways so that we can help educate all of our water users. That should be at the forefront of our service, I think. Whether that's through boater inspections, the routine patrols that they do on the waterways, being available to do any one-on-one community group talks. We definitely are involved in those types of activities, and I would encourage us to continue to do that. We can increase a united message of safety and try to just incorporate that message through all of the contacts that we do have. I think that we can promote the safe use of all of the shared areas. I think it's really important to understand that there are so many different kinds of users, and to be able to express to everyone, how their actions on the water can affect others is an important thing to be able to do. So, I look forward to being able to even be the person as sheriff to go out and talk to the different groups to try to manage conflicts. I think some of those can be handled on the waterways through the enforcement and the education that we can do, but some of them will take, more mediation in some situations. And in that regard, I think I'd be a very competent person to be able to manage those. So thank you.
Okay, next, Mr. Bauer.
Unmute. Okay. I think my opening comments or written statement was about quiet enjoyment. We all have a right to quiet enjoyment of our environment. And if we are sharing it with other people, then it's a joint responsibility. Enforcement is certainly the stick. The carrot would be some cooperative effort. I think that that what we need is to manage this problem by presence. And that doesn't necessarily mean citing everybody. It may mean more warnings. It may mean more stops and talks to people about safety and make sure they have their equipment and just that sort of thing. But I think we need to have a more presence will reduce the amount of conflict between the various competing uses of that water. And of course, dangerous people need to be removed immediately. We have to be very firm about that. But just seeing maybe more of the sheriff's vessels on the water is going to be a real discouragement to people that would act out and cause problems and conflict. Other than that, it may require some meetings of the various equipment or activity groups with the homeowners and to discuss how to work it out in a cooperative fashion.
Okay, Mr. Grimm.
Thank you. I think coming from a more pragmatic standpoint, the sheriff really does have limited resources for these educational outreach programs. And, if everyone is following the rules, then the conflicts mitigate themselves. And I don't want to appear to be too hard-nosed about this, but like I said, I'm pretty firm in my belief, and having witnessed, there's something about when people get out on the lake, their common sense goes out the window. And you might be able to have some positive contacts overall, but swift enforcement when life or limb is potentially at stake is really the only answer in some cases. And, I've seen numerous times where people have been flagrant in their disregard for the safety of others, pushing a large wake next to a small kayak with a mother and daughter in it or something. That person needs to get a citation. So that would be my approach and presence. If you look at what happened on the Spokane River last year, we had lots and lots of complaints. And once these groups came out and like yourselves and put pressure on the sheriff's office, and this is my biggest concern, is law enforcement is traditionally reactionary. They don't know how to be proactive. But when they are pushed, they start enforcement. Look what happened on the Spokane River. The complaints went to near zero. So anyways, thank you.
Let's see, we're to Mr. Whitehead, I believe.
I have a lot of experience sitting on committees with diverse groups as well as chairing committees with diverse groups. And I have found that usually it is a lack of understanding. So I think the easiest and first thing to do is to get all the diverse users together and let them express their concerns and let each party, each group understand the other's concerns. And a lot of that will work itself out once one group understands what their impact is on the other group and vice versa. As far as enforcement and whether you're proactive or reactive, when you don't have enough resources, that forces you to be reactive. Where if we can fill our boats or add to the amount of boats we have, it makes it a lot easier to be proactive and know the lake and know the areas that can be the traditional trouble spots and be in those areas more often. But the first step is education and getting everybody to the table to get to understand each other, and then listen to the concerns and moderate those concerns to be a win-win for all the users. And I've had a lot of success in that philosophy in the past.
Thank you. Mr. Norris, I believe.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
So just like cars and pedestrians and bicycles on the highway, we have to promote education on our waterways. Because and I think that what we hit on before, as far as having a volunteer or an employee at some of these boat ramps to be able to provide some information on some of the hazards that particular area is experiencing. And it goes back to that volunteer forces to be able to have somebody at these launches at peak times to be able to educate these boaters that are coming into our community, maybe for the very first time, or sometimes they're frequent users. But we have many people that come here from Washington, and they may be first-time users, and it's really important that they know what the hazards and what the rules are for that particular waterway. And we keep going back to, you know, a more robust volunteer services program. And this is another example where this could aid in that education.
Okay. Since education came up, that's really the next question. Would you favor mandatory boat education for all new boat owners in Kootenai County and for current drivers 18 years old or younger? And that question, I think, is to Mr. Bauer initially.
On that was I didn't really think it was a practical thing to do, and one of the problems was just identified, and that's if you have people from out of state, eagle watchers, you have your your kayakers, you have your boaters coming over here, and it's really a difficult thing to make half the people take a class on this and the other half not. Now, I would certainly support giving the training literature and that making it mandatory. People selling the equipment, make sure that the buyers of that equipment, users of that equipment, have a copy of that information. But for mandatory training, I just don't think it's practical, and I know for sure we don't have the money for it right now. So once we got enough personnel to deal with the problems we do have, perhaps we could get some more money and spend it on some educational resources for us. But for now, my view is that it's not practical at this time.
Okay, let's see, that would be Mr. Whitehead next then. No, Mr. Grimm, I'm sorry, Mr. Grimm.
As I said in my response, yes, I am in favor of mandatory education. I just don't think it'll get passed in the state legislature. The reason why is most of our lakes are up here, and southern Idaho is it's a different state. They don't understand the same problems we have up here, and I think it boils down also to our more liberty mindset here in Idaho. So, as much as I would like to see it happen, because I think it would be a good improvement, I just don't think it'll happen. I just don't think it's possible. Yeah, I wish I had more to offer, but I don't think it's a practical solution right now.
Okay, let's go to Mr. Whitehead, please.
I think there's a balance. Having owned boats and operated vessels before, I would not want to have to take a class to operate a boat in Idaho. However, if I'm a brand new boat operator and I'm just buying my boat for the first time, then an avenue to get that education, I think, would be excellent, whether it's provided by the boat sellers or the marinas, or is fee driven for the class. Another way to approach that would be, and this would cover whether you're in state or out of state, is a lot of states have a process when you're driving if you get a traffic ticket, you can go to a driver safety education class and get your ticket dismissed once you show proof of attending this class, of which you have to pay for. I think instituting a similar program for that, to where if you are cited on the lake for being unsafe, then if you attend a boater safety class, you can get your ticket dismissed or reduced for attending that class. For brand new boaters, 18 and under, I think that's also critical, just like driving a car, but I would also like to see it done in a way where the parents can provide that proof of education, some type of home curricula. They can do it where we're not creating another bureaucracy. I'm a less government person, so I'm sure we could find a way that's user-friendly and less government intrusive to make it happen and work out the details.
Okay, let's see, it would go to Mr. Help me out here. Where am I? We're at the head of the rotation, right?
I think it's me.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Norris. I'm sorry.
So I know that the Idaho Department of Parks and Recreation does have a 6-hour class. It's voluntary at this point in time. I know that there is an ordinance that was before the Board of Commissioners to consider requiring something on our Kootenai County waterways. You know, I think it's a conversation I'd like to have. I think it's a conversation I'd like to have with our experts. I think it's a conversation I'd like to have with our lawmakers. And is it a prudent idea for a 16-year-old to have some education? Yeah, I think so. Now, whether it's mandated or not, or how we accomplish that, I think that it's something we can have a conversation on.
Okay. Ms. Edmondson?
Yes, thank you. You know, I hadn't even considered mandatory voter education until the question was asked. So I appreciate the opportunity to consider that. I would be open to the idea of it. I think that there are a lot of already creative things that were suggested. I like what Rick said about, you know, being able to attend a class to, you know, have a violation amended or dismissed. I think that's, there are fantastic ideas, things that we could utilize like that in the future. But there are a lot of things we could research and look at. I think the problem does begin, you know, ends up being about, yeah, you know, how's it going to be funded? Who's going to take the program on? You know, as far as the management of it. And so with the limited resources that we do have, and just trying to get the deputies out there to be able to patrol the waterways, you know, we'd need people that would be able to put that type of course on if we were to take on that responsibility. So I don't know if it has to fall with us or if it could fall with the Coast Guard or any of the other agencies in the area, but it's a great idea to look at for the future and something to consider.
Okay, let's move on to the next question. And I'll preface this by saying we hear more about this in the association leadership from our members than probably about anything, and it's excessive wakes. I know this is a hot potato right now. Kootenai County regulators specify no wake on lakes within, or no wake on zones on lakes within 200 feet of shoreline, docks, piers, breakwaters, or a person in the water. Do you believe excessive or illegal wakes can be determined by sight? And would you support your marine deputies to estimate an excessive wake by sight? Or would your deputies enforce existing, how would your deputies enforce existing regulations? And that's to Mr. Bauer, no, to Mr. Grimm, I believe.
Yes, thank you. You know, you folks had a meeting, it was back in November or so at the country club. And at the time, I pressed Sergeant Klinkefuss about enforcing the current laws. And the response was something to the effect of, well, we think they're unenforceable. And the problem with that is, like I said, is that presupposes that every citation is going to be challenged. And that's just not the case. You know, just like with traffic enforcement, not everyone has to get a citation. It's enough to see that the law enforcement has a presence on the water, and you set an expectation of a behavior that excessive wakes aren't going to be, you know, especially if they're damaging anything. I don't think we need to reinvent anything. this comes back to, Idaho statutes are elegantly simple. Anybody with an 8th grade education can read and understand them. And they were written to be utilized. I think we should enforce what we have right now. And some of them can apply exactly to that, because it doesn't matter what kind of vessel it is and what speed they're traveling at. It deals with under conditions that throws an excessive wake. And so to answer your question, yes, I think with some sort of training, you could get an estimation curriculum installed so that deputies could use in their best estimation what the size of the wake was, and that would hold up.
Okay, let's go on to Mr. Whitehead, please.
Having worked Marine Division, estimating wake height or having a law that says if the wake height reaches this, that is completely unenforceable. It's an opinion. It would be like hearsay evidence in court. I might think your wake is 18 inches and the requirement's 24 or whatever it is. Estimating wake height is a guessing game and unenforceable. It's either a wake or it's not a wake. You're either plowing or you're coming over plow up to speed and you're not plowing. The solution is, and 200 feet, I know some of your groups, if not all your groups, are working on legislation or code to extend the wake zone area out to 500 feet because of the wakes that are created these days with the vessels we have. 200 feet is still too close to the shoreline and the docks to not do the damage. It takes 500 feet to dissipate those wakes. I think the solution is it's either a wake or it's not a wake, and having smart wake zones, working with the Idaho Department of Lands, who controls the water, with the county commissioners, with the users, and with the enforcers to all come together and set up smart no wake zones, especially up and down the rivers and the narrow parts, to mitigate that damage and eliminate that damage, push those big wakes out into the lake, but still out in far enough where you're not going to damage docks that are on the lakes. But it's a wake or it's not a wake. Height is a guessing game, and I've been in court lots in my career, and guessing wake height is going to be easily dismissed. You'd be spinning your wheels trying to write tickets on how high the wake is.
Thank you. Mr. Norris.
Yes. So just to kind of give you an example, when you see a car that's traveling down Highway 95 and you think it's going pretty fast. So my gosh, that car must be speeding. So let's say that person receives a citation and goes court, and the judge says, well, how fast was that car going? Well, I don't know. I just know it was speeding. Well, how do you know it was speeding if you don't know how fast it was going? So determining the definition of excessive weight, I got to tell you, it's very, very difficult to do in a court of law. Yeah. Do we see it that it's speeding in that example, or do we see that it's excessive weight because it's in violation of creating damage and what have you? Absolutely. But to be able to articulate that as an element in an infraction in a court of law, it's very difficult to do. Now, I do understand that there is an ordinance before the Board of Commissioners to try to determine that what is excessive weight, but it's going to be very difficult to enforce, because if you one of the other candidates said that, well, not everybody's going to fight it. Well, they're not going to fight it maybe for the first couple of months, but as soon as a couple people do fight it or contest it, then they're going to tell, the word's going to get out, and the word's going to get out, and then it's not going to be enforceable. So it's not an easy fix. I mean, I got to defer to Rick. Rick had some great points, and I absolutely agree with him, because it's very difficult to sit in a court of law to say, yeah, he was speeding without being able to determine how fast he was going. And I'm giving you an example of a highway versus, because obviously everybody has an idea on speeding in a vehicle. So thank you.
Okay, Kim Edmondson.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with the last couple of statements as far as, the unenforceability of the wakes. To get the actual weight or wake height is difficult. I think experienced marine deputies could certainly say a wake is excessive, but you need to be able to say specifically, that it's above a certain point for it to be enforceable. And I think that will be challenged a lot by the courts. So I wouldn't support that, but I do think that they need to, continue to enforce the violations that do exist that can create wakes, the speeds, the damage, those other things that are enforceable. And that's the way that we can set that expectation of what safe boating looks like in our community, and it's important to be able to do that.
Okay. Mr. Bauer.
I think my response in writing was that it's up to the court what to accept for testimony from an officer on what the officer saw. So if we asked our judges, what do you want for proof that somebody violated the wake law, and we'll provide it to you, whether that's a body cam picture of the wake itself and the boat going by, whether that is an estimate. But in any case, an estimate has to be documented with some sort of training. You have to be able to prove that you've been trained and that you are proficient in estimating anything, whether it's speed on the highway or whether it's the height of a wake or whether it's how much smoke's in the air. You just have to have some sort of evidence in court that you can prove it. Just in our system, I think somebody's going to make a lot of money by making a buoy with a light on top of it. And when the buoy goes up and down too much, the light comes on and the boater says, I better slow down, I'm going to get a citation. It's a possibility that somebody like John Grimm could do that with his machine shop. But there are other ways to handle it. I guess we just haven't figured it out yet.
Okay, well, I think that concludes our questions. I want to thank you all for your participation on behalf of both, not only the Watershed Association, but also the Spokane River Associations and homeowners groups as well. And I'll turn it back over to Will. Will, you're going to have to unmute.
Yeah.
There we go.
Thank you, Jeff. So thank you very much to the candidates for participating in our forum. And we really want to thank all of our viewers for joining us today. And we would ask that everyone consider supporting Hayden Lake Watershed Association by filling out a membership form before you go to our website today. Thanks again to all. Be healthy and safe.
Thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Very good. Very good. Thank you.